We need to get you inside, now.
Don't call anyone. They'll kill me before sunrise. That was the first thing he said. Not help, not please. Just that cold, trembling, soaked to the bone, bleeding through a torn white dress shirt that once screamed power and status. The door of Gracie's diner slammed shut behind him, caught by the wind and the weight of the storm. Lightning flashed across the parking lot, casting shadows that danced across Melani's face. She stood behind the counter, gripping a dish towel, frozen mid-wipe. It was past 2 a.m., and just minutes earlier she had been quietly cleaning up the mess, left by a group of smug, drunk truckers who mocked her hair, asked if she even spoke proper English, and left a pile of crumbs with no tip. She wasn't expecting visitors, definitely not bleeding ones. The man stumbled toward her, leaving a trail of red on the faded black and white tiles. His shoes, Italian leather, clearly expensive, were ruined. His watch, still ticking. His eyes, haunted. Melani didn't move. Not yet. Not until his knees gave out and he collapsed right in front of booth 4. Don't call anyone, he repeated, voice lower now. They'll find me if you do. She had every reason to run. A young black woman, alone in the middle of nowhere, facing a white man she'd never met, dressed like Wall Street but bleeding like a crime scene. But Melani was different. She always had been. Maybe it was her grandma's voice in her head. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something else. She dropped the towel and rushed toward him. Sir, you need help. I need time, he whispered. Just an hour, please. She saw something flicker in his face, not fear, not just pain, something buried. Regret? Desperation? Whatever it was, it made her stay. If you're watching this on Hidden Worth, you already know this isn't just a rescue story. It's a black story about grace, danger, and a woman who trusted her gut when the world told her not to. Stick around. This night, it's the start of something none of them saw coming. Before the night of the storm, Melani had already lived 1,000 quiet battles no one ever noticed. She was 26, raised in the small city of Savannah by her grandmother, Loretta, who ran a tiny corner store and taught her 2 things. Keep your dignity and keep moving. Her mother had passed away when she was 7, her father long gone before that. By 16, Melani was working part-time at the diner to help pay the bills, wiping tables after school while other kids went to prom. People noticed her beauty first. Smooth, copper-brown skin, natural curls pinned up neatly under a simple headband, eyes so dark they reflected the neon lights of the diner like midnight glass, a smile bright enough to soften the hardest customer. But behind that smile was a spine of steel. Every day she stood on her feet for 14 hours, balancing plates, remembering orders, deflecting comments that cut deeper than they sounded. Do you even belong here? You're pretty for a black girl. Don't forget my coffee, sweetheart. She had learned to let the words pass over her like rain. Her uniform was always crisp. Her hands never shook. Her tips were sometimes enough, sometimes not. But she saved every dollar she could, dreaming of one day opening her own coffee shop, a place where people like her could walk in and feel seen. Melani loved small things. The smell of cinnamon rolls warming in the oven, the sound of an old blues record spinning in the back kitchen, the way her grandmother's voice filled the house each morning with prayer. These were her anchors, the things that kept her from drowning in a world that didn't always see her worth. She also had a fierce sense of fairness. When she saw another waitress being shorted on tips, she shared hers. When a homeless man came to the back door of the diner, she wrapped up leftovers for him without asking the manager. She never saw it as charity. She called it balance. If the world keeps taking from you, she once told a friend, give anyway. It confuses the darkness. That night, as she knelt beside the bleeding stranger, all of that, the years of swallowing insults, the small kindnesses, the quiet discipline rose to the surface. This was who she was, light in the shadows. She didn't know yet that the man she was helping would turn her world upside down. She only knew that he needed her, and that was enough. He said his name was Gregory Cross. His voice was low, rough like sandpaper soaked in whiskey, but calm, too calm for someone bleeding out in a stranger's booth. He wouldn't say what happened, only that he needed rest. No police, no hospital, just a little time. Melani wasn't naive. she noticed everything. The shoes didn't match the story. Handmade leather with gold initials stamped inside. The shirt Italian, not off the rack. The watch on his wrist alone probably cost more than her yearly rent. Even bloodied, bruised, and wet, he moved with the kind of composure that didn't come from fear. It came from power. His hands were large, strong, but manicured. The kind of hands that signed deals, not washed dishes. His hair was slicked back but now clung to his forehead, wet from the storm. There was a scar just below his jawline, faint, surgical, the kind you only get if you've been somewhere expensive and dangerous. Gregory refused food, water, even pain meds. He just sat there, shifting his weight, checking the window every few minutes, like he expected a gun to appear behind the glass at any moment. Still, despite the tension in his body, he didn't threaten her. He didn't raise his voice. He even thanked her when she gave him a blanket and offered to make coffee. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know," Milani answered, "but I'm doing it anyway." There was a silence after that. Not awkward, heavy. He studied her, not with suspicion, but with confusion, like she didn't fit into any category he was used to. She wasn't afraid, wasn't impressed, wasn't trying to take advantage. That's what shook him most. What she didn't know yet was that Gregory Cross didn't exist. The man in her booth was Asher Vance, billionaire CEO of Vance Tech, one of the most powerful and controversial men in America. The media called him ruthless. Business journals called him brilliant. Former employees called him cold. He had disappeared 3 nights ago after a private board meeting went sideways, and now, hiding in the corner of a diner in rural Georgia, his fate sat in the hands of a waitress who didn't even recognize his face. But maybe that's exactly why he stayed. The diner felt quieter the next day. The kind of quiet that wraps around your ribs and squeezes without warning. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray, thick with clouds like something was still coming. Milani kept the blinds halfway down. She moved through her morning routine like clockwork, prepping coffee, wiping tables, setting up condiments. But her ears stayed tuned to every creak, every passing engine. Asher, still calling himself Gregory, had slept fitfully in the small office behind the kitchen. She brought him crackers, water, a clean t-shirt from the back. He took everything with polite nods but said little. Then, around noon, the black SUV rolled in. Not the kind you see in family car commercials. This one had tinted windows darker than the law allows, and no plates. It idled outside for a moment, then 2 men stepped out. Both wore sharp suits, like they'd walked out of a high-rise but brought the chill of danger with them. One was tall, pale, with slicked-back blonde hair and aviator sunglasses even though the sun hadn't shone all morning. The other was stockier, black, with a thick neck and a military jawline. Neither smiled. They walked into the diner like they owned it. Milani stood still behind the counter, her pulse steady but high. The blonde one spoke first. "We're looking for someone. Might have come through here last night. Tall, light skin, injured." His tone wasn't friendly, but not hostile either. Just cold, like ordering coffee with menace under it. Milani didn't blink. "Only people I saw last night were a bunch of loud drunks and a raccoon in the dumpster." The man raised an eyebrow. The other scanned the room slowly. One of them let his fingers drift over the counter, trailing dust that wasn't there. "You sure about that?" "Positive," she replied, casually flipping a coffee mug onto the counter. They exchanged a look, quick, silent, and then nodded. "If he shows up, call this number." He slid a business card across the counter. No name, just a phone number and a logo she didn't recognize. She didn't touch it. They left without another word. When the SUV disappeared down the road, Milani finally exhaled. She locked the front door, turned the closed sign around, and walked to the back. "He's got eyes on you," she said through the doorway. Asher looked up from the floor, face pale. She added, "Next time maybe don't wear shoes that cost 2 months of my rent." And for the first time, he smiled. That night, the diner stayed dark. The closed sign remained flipped, and Milani didn't bother with the usual routines. No music, no fryer, no late-night locals craving fries and gossip. Just silence, and one man lying low in the back room with the weight of $1 billion secret pressing down on him. He hadn't said much since the visit from the men in the black SUV. But Mailani could feel it building in him, like a storm trying to hold itself back. She brought him warm soup and sat across from him at the break table, arms folded, eyes steady. "You owe me the truth," she said quietly. Not a threat, a fact. Asher looked at her for a long moment, the lines around his mouth tight. Then he nodded. "My name isn't Gregory, it's Asher Vance." The name didn't land right away. Then her eyes widened. It was a name she'd heard on business channels, magazine covers, tech podcasts. Billionaire, Ruthless CEO. Founder of Vance Tech, the company behind everything from facial recognition software to defense contracts. "You're the guy who laid off 10,000 people by email," she said, half in shock. "I'm also the guy they tried to kill 3 nights ago," he replied. He told her everything. The private board meeting that turned into a power grab, the forged documents, the assistant who disappeared after digging too deep, the company plane that mysteriously malfunctioned. He'd gotten out just in time, switching cars, phones, and cities, trying to disappear until he could figure out who set him up. Mailani sat quietly through all of it. No gasps, no interruptions, just listening. "So why here? Why my diner?" Asher shrugged, the exhaustion visible in his eyes. "I didn't plan to end up here. I was driving south, trying to disappear. My car broke down a few miles up the road. Then the rain hit. I saw the lights and ran." She studied him for a while. The billionaire who'd never held a mop now hiding in a place where she'd spent half her life scrubbing floors. "You're not a good liar," she said finally. "I know. But you're not the worst kind of man either." He looked at her then, not like a CEO, just like someone who wasn't used to being seen without armor. "Thank you for not turning me in," he said. Mailani leaned back, arms crossed again. "Don't thank me yet. I'm still deciding if you're worth it." The rain had passed, but the air still smelled like wet pavement and pine. Everything outside felt washed clean, but inside the diner, a different storm had just begun to settle. By nightfall, Asher had moved from the cramped storage room into the back booth, the one with the least visibility from the road and the softest seat. His hoodie hung loosely over his eyes, his movements slow, guarded. The bruises on his ribs were yellowing now, but his face stayed tight, like he was still flinching from something that hadn't quite hit him yet. Mailani didn't ask many more questions. Instead, she brought him coffee the way he hadn't asked for black, no sugar, no cream. She didn't care if he liked it. It was hot and strong, and that was enough. "You always treat strange men like this?" he asked, cradling the mug in both hands. "Only the ones bleeding all over my floor," she replied. That made him chuckle. It was the first real laugh she'd heard from him, and it caught her off guard. He wasn't just hiding, he was unraveling. That night, they talked longer. It wasn't the usual kind of talk, no politics, no news, no small talk. It was memory sharing, scraps of real life. She told him about working double shifts while attending community college, about the customers who thought her name was too exotic to remember. He told her about his childhood nanny, the only person who hugged him without scheduling it in a calendar. "Your world's louder than mine," she said. "It's lonelier too," he replied. There was a pause after that, one of those pauses that doesn't beg to be filled, just felt. She asked if he had anyone waiting for him. He shook his head, said he trusted no one, not anymore. And maybe that was the saddest part, not the chase, not the lies, not even the attempted murder, but the way he said that last sentence like it was just another truth, like gravity. Before bed, she handed him a paperback novel she found under the register. A story about redemption and war, the kind with too many metaphors. He didn't make a joke about it. He just nodded and said, "Thank you." She paused at the doorway, looking back one last time before flicking off the diner lights. "Good night, Gregory," she said. "Good night, Mailani," he answered. And for the first time in days, he slept without waking up in fear. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that pretends to be normal. The morning was slow. A couple truckers came through for coffee and pie. A mother with a crying toddler took a booth by the window. Mailani kept her routine tight, careful. Asher stayed in the back, mostly silent, occasionally watching the road from the tiny office window. Nothing felt wrong until it did. Around noon, Milani stepped out back to throw away the trash. She didn't notice the teenager hanging by the dumpster, hoodie up, phone out, earbuds in. One quick glance at the diner. One tap to record. He wasn't filming her. He was filming the man standing behind the back window, sipping coffee, face turned half toward the light. And then he posted it. Less than 2 hours later, the diner's phone started ringing off the hook. The comments came first. Online forums, TikTok, Twitter. Yo, is that Asher Vance? That's the dude who vanished. Why he hiding in Georgia at some rundown diner? Within minutes, the story exploded. By 3 p.m., a black SUV was parked across the street again. This time, it wasn't just 2 men in suits. It was 4, plus a white van and a news truck. Milani locked the doors, drew the blinds, turned the sign to closed, even though it already was. Asher looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. His shoulders sagged, his eyes went flat, and then he laughed. But not the good kind. It was sharp, bitter, hollow. I told you this would happen, he said. I never should have stayed. She didn't say anything, couldn't. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with something worse, disappointment. I didn't ask for any of this, she said. I know. You said no one was looking for you. I lied. Yeah, she nodded, voice flat. You did. There was no shouting, no meltdown, just silence. A few minutes later, the door shattered. Flashlights, commands, a dozen boots on tile. Milani stood frozen while they dragged him out in cuffs, shouting orders she couldn't even process. No one looked at her. Not really. She was background noise again. Invisible. Disposable. And just like that, Asher Vance was gone. So was the man who called himself Gregory. And Milani? She was left with the sound of broken glass and questions she never thought she'd have to ask. They expected her to disappear. To take the hit and keep her head down, like most people in her position did. Poor, black, female, working in a diner. How loud could her voice possibly be? Turns out, louder than they ever imagined. The morning after Asher was dragged out in handcuffs, Milani sat alone in the diner, staring at the mess left behind. Broken glass from the front door, chairs knocked over, a cracked salt shaker lying in a puddle of spilled coffee. The booth where he had once sat was empty now, just like the silence that filled the space. Then the headlines started coming in. Fugitive billionaire hiding in rural Georgia diner. Local woman allegedly shelters CEO wanted in financial scandal. Waitress turned accomplice. They didn't call her by name, not at first, but her face was everywhere, frozen in grainy screenshots, sliced into thumbnails, replayed on loops by gossip blogs and news stations alike. The internet did what it always does, it twisted the story. People speculated. Some accused her of sleeping with him. Others said she was part of some corporate heist. She lost 2 job offers within 24 hours. Her landlord gave her a week to move out. Someone keyed her car. Another left a threatening note taped to the diner's front door. Milani had never wanted to be part of any spotlight, but when the world shoved her into it, she didn't flinch. That night, she sat down at the same booth where Asher had once said, "Don't call anyone," and went live on social media. No makeup, no filter, no PR team. Just truth. "My name is Milani Brooks," she said. "I'm not an accomplice. I'm not a pawn. I'm a human being who helped someone who was bleeding in front of me. That's it. I didn't ask for attention, and I sure didn't ask for this mess. But since you're all watching, let me tell you something." And then she told them about the assumptions, the microaggressions, the years of being overlooked, disrespected, dismissed. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just told the story the way only she could, calm, clear, and powerful. By morning, the clip had gone viral. Tens of thousands of comments, hashtags trending, celebrities sharing her words. Former employees of Vance Tech called her braver than their own bosses. News anchors re-aired her speech with admiration. Suddenly, the question wasn't, who is she? It was, why did we doubt her? And across the state, inside a locked federal holding cell, Asher Vance watched it unfold. Not as a CEO, not as a fugitive, just as a man who realized, for the first time, what real strength looked like. Asher Vance had once been the kind of man who measured success in stock prices, square footage, and how fast his private jet could get from New York to Zurich. He used to believe that power was the ability to walk into any room and have everyone fall silent. That control meant never being questioned, never needing anyone. But in that small, windowless federal holding cell, stripped of his title, his suit, and his polished public persona, all he had left was silence. And Mailani's voice, echoing from a smuggled news clip on a guard's phone. He watched it again and again, not just her words, but her eyes, steady, fierce, unapologetically honest. She hadn't defended him. She hadn't tried to spin the story. She had simply told the truth, hers and his, and somehow that truth held more weight than all the lawyers and PR agents he used to throw money at. It woke something in him, something he'd buried for years beneath boardroom tables and balance sheets. When the investigation cleared him after weeks of corporate infighting exposed the real culprits behind the sabotage attempt, he was offered his throne back. CEO, chairman. All the power he'd lost, waiting at his feet. He said no. For the first time in his adult life, Asher Vance walked away from power by choice. Instead, he founded something new. Quiet at first. No press. No ribbon cutting. Just a team of social workers, community leaders, and youth advocates. He called it the Shelter Project, a nonprofit designed to support overlooked communities, especially single mothers, Black business owners, and formerly incarcerated individuals looking for a second chance. The first building they funded? A complete renovation of Gracie's Diner. He didn't just rebuild it. He transformed it into a hybrid space, half diner, half community center. A place where meals were served on one side and resumes were written on the other. Where neighborhood kids could do homework while their moms waited tables. Where no one asked who you were before deciding if you deserved help. On opening day, a new sign was mounted above the entrance. Mailani's place. He didn't tell her in advance. Just stood quietly on the sidewalk, watching her see it for the first time. She looked at him, mouth half open in disbelief. "You named it after me?" she asked. "No," he said. "You earned it." And for the first time since that stormy night, they both knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It rained again, just like that first night. Same thick southern sky, same soft rhythm on the windows, same kind of quiet that made the world feel smaller and more honest. Mailani stood outside the diner, her diner now under the awning, arms crossed, watching the rain hit the sidewalk in soft waves. The neon sign glowed warm above her head. Mailani's place. It still felt unreal. Inside, the booths were full of voices, laughter, plates clinking. The smell of fresh cornbread floated through the air. A group of teenagers were helping a tutor run a college prep session in the back corner, but she wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about him. Asher had been distant since the opening. Not cold, just restrained, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to stay in her story, or if he was just a chapter that helped her get here. He walked up quietly, hands in his jacket pockets, looking like a man still learning how to belong somewhere real. "You always stand in the rain on purpose?" he asked. "Only when I'm waiting for someone brave enough to join me," she replied. He stepped under the awning beside her. For a few seconds, neither of them said a word. Just stood there, listening to the rain fall between them. "I didn't come here to mess up your life," he finally said. "You didn't," she answered. "You reminded me what I'm made of." He looked at her then, not with guilt, not with fear, but with something he'd never had enough of. Vulnerability. "I've had a lot of titles," he said. "Founder, CEO, billionaire. But the only one that ever made sense was the guy who owed everything to the woman who saved his life." She laughed softly. "That's a long title. Doesn't really fit on a business card." "I'm not trying to fit into anything anymore," he said. "Except maybe here, if there's still space." She turned to him, searching his eyes for the truth. Not charm, not a line, just realness. "I'm not a rescue mission," she said. "I know," he nodded. "But I want to stay anyway." The rain poured harder. He took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. She didn't need it, but she let him. "Come inside," she said. "It's warm." And maybe it wasn't a love story, not yet. But it was a beginning. A promise, made under rain. 2 years can change everything, or nothing at all. Gracie's diner was now unrecognizable, but the soul of it remained. The chrome counters had been replaced with reclaimed wood, the flickering lights swapped out for warm Edison bulbs. A mural of local heroes stretched across one wall, nurses, teachers, a single mother holding her child. And right in the center, painted in soft pastels, was a young black woman with her head held high and a storm behind her. Mailani. It had been 731 days since she last saw Asher in person. He'd left shortly after the opening of Mailani's place, not out of fear, not out of shame, but because she told him to go figure out who he really was without the title, the money, or the running. "I don't need a savior," she told him. "I need a man who knows his own shadow." So he left. And while he traveled through small towns, quiet libraries, remote clinics he helped fund, she stayed and built. Mailani's place became more than a diner. It became a movement. They opened 2 more locations. Local news picked it up, then national, then global. Not because of money, but because of the message. Kindness, dignity, second chances. And then one crisp October afternoon, just before sunset, he came back. No cameras, no headlines, just him. He stood across the street for a long while, watching the people flow in and out. Kids in school uniforms, seniors sharing pie, young mothers on break from double shifts. He smiled, quietly. And then he stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed just like it used to. Mailani was at the counter, pouring coffee, her hair tied up the same way, her eyes still just as fierce. She didn't look up at first. "Booth or counter?" she asked. "Whichever comes with a second chance," he said. She froze, slowly turned, their eyes met. He looked older, softer, like a man who'd finally learned the weight of stillness. She set the coffee pot down and came around the counter. "No briefcase?" she teased. "No empire," he smiled. She reached out, took his hand, not to shake it, just to feel it, to be sure. And then she pulled him in. Not into an embrace, but into home. Not every storm comes to destroy, some arrive to reveal. The night Mailani opened her door to a bleeding stranger, she didn't know she was stepping into a story that would change lives, not just his, but hers too. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't ask for reward. She didn't even ask for the truth. She just acted on instinct, on humanity. And sometimes, that's all it takes. This story isn't about wealth, power, or corporate corruption. It's about what happens when someone chooses kindness in a world that profits from indifference. When someone holds the door open, even when the world has slammed it in their own face time and time again. Mailani wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. She didn't have a platform or a brand. What she had was integrity, and that, in the end, was more valuable than any fortune Asher Vance had ever built. Asher's fall wasn't the tragedy. His rebirth was the real story. Because what good is success if it disconnects you from compassion? What good is a name if it only echoes in rooms filled with fear? He had spent years building an empire. She had spent years surviving one shift at a time. But in the eye of the storm, it was the woman who wiped tables, brewed coffee, and swallowed daily insults who stood taller than anyone else. This is a reminder that the people we underestimate most often carry the greatest strength. That true transformation doesn't come from money or headlines, it comes from being willing to be seen, to listen, to change. So maybe ask yourself, who do you overlook every day? Who are the Mailanis in your world standing tall in silence, giving grace without applause? And if the storm ever finds you, will you be the one asking for shelter? Or the one offering it? Here at Hidden Worth, we share stories just like this. Black stories, human stories, real stories that remind us what matters most. If this one moved you, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there, another storm is brewing. And maybe, just maybe, a simple act of kindness will change everything again.